it's me, Jarrett, from your favorite band, Bowling for Soup. Thank you for tuning in to the 10 Minutes with Boston Chris podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to another great episode of the Boston Chris podcast, and I've got a huge treat for everybody out there today. Still can't believe we had the absolute honor of sitting down and chatting with the one and only, the legendary rock music icon, Mike Tramp, from the bands White Lion and Freak of Nature. Super excited to give you guys this episode, and let me tell you guys a little bit about Mike if you are somehow not familiar with Mike Tramp. Mike Tramp was born in Denmark, grew up in Vesterbro with his mother Doris, who took care of him and his two brothers, Dennis and Kim. Mike started his musical career singing in a youth group club in Copenhagen called Vesterbro, and appears on their first album. That was in 1974, 50 years ago. Later, he joined the pop band Mabel as their lead singer. They recorded 4 albums and were very popular in Denmark and Spain, with Mike receiving teen idol status. In 1978, Mabel also won the Danish Song Contest with the song Boom Boom and represented Denmark in the Eurovision Song Contest that year. Mabel moved to New York City in 1970, in the late 1970s, but soon broke up. And after the demise of Mabel, Tramp met Vito Bratta, and they formed the iconic White Lion. Now, after the demise of White Lion in 1992, Mike formed the rock band Freak of Nature, with whom he released 3 more albums. And in 2005, Tramp formed the band Tramp's White Lion, playing only White Lion songs. Mike Tramp has also released 14 solo albums over the course of his career, and he has now released Songs of White Lion Volume 1, and now, today, I believe as this episode comes out, the brand new record, Songs of White Lion Volume 2, has hit stores and music formats everywhere. We're super excited to talk to Mike about all of the things I just mentioned, from his time in Denmark in his early years to getting out of Denmark, moving to the United States, his time with White Lion, his sound with Freak of Nature, of course, my favorite part of Mike's career, his solo years, and his extensive touring throughout his entire 50-year career. I think you guys are going to like this one. Can't wait to get into it. Y'all check out this amazing, candid, in-depth interview with the one and only Mike Tramp. Hey guys, welcome to another fabulous episode of the Boston Chris Show, the 10 Minutes with Boston Chris podcast. And today, man, we have a huge treat for everybody. We have the one and only Mike Tramp on the show. First of all, Mike, thanks for your time today, man. How's everything going?
It's my pleasure. I'm all good. Had a great day, and over here in Denmark, it's a bit later than it is where you are.
Yeah, it's noon here and 7 where you are, so you might have lottery numbers I don't have yet.
There's a lot of things I can predict, you know.
Yeah, tell me the winners of the baseball games. That's what I need. So
I can tell you.
the first question that I always start my interviews with, just to kind of break the ice a little bit. What are your favorite drinks right now? What have you been drinking lately?
Well, I mean, I'm pretty simple in that way. You know, I love beer, and I love IPAs. You know, and when I drink a beer, I mean, I like to really enjoy it. So it's not a whole 6-pack. It's usually just like a pint or something very ice cold, and then enjoy it. And then after that, and here late in the evening when I'm working on in the studio and stuff like that, you know, I go out and mix myself a nice G&T, a gin and tonic, you know.
Very nice. Yeah, I'm kind of the same kind of beer drinker as you then. Like once in a while for me, maybe once every couple days, I like to have a good beer. But yeah, I'm definitely there. So let's get into it, man. Long career. This, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, this is your 50th year in the music business. I think you started in 74, right?
You know what? You hit that right on the nail, man. I was just in this. It says 50. Holy
yeah, this is 50 years this year.
Jesus, this should be outlawed.
Yeah. No, don't outlaw it. No way. Too much good music coming from you. So let's start back then. As a young guy, how did your musical future kind of start taking shape?
Well, I mean, first of all, obviously, I never had any plan of going into music. I mean,
Right.
I mean, these days, kids are growing up with so much information and a view of the world and right in their hands. Um, but whenever a song were being played or an instrument were being played in school or the youth club, well, I would be in the front singing along or with time grabbing the guitar and teaching myself how to play a few Elvis songs and blowing in the wind and hanging out at the campfire and having all the other kids sing along and in reality that's my foundation right there, and I think I'm still using the same sort of approach that my songs have to be able to have someone join in, singing along, and so that's sort of the approach I take to how simple a song should be. That we end up, in the different bands that I've been in, stuff like that, making some songs into like a 8-minute epic and stuff like that. It's a different story.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the overall melody and stuff like that, I want to be on a simple side.
And growing up in Denmark, what were the musical opportunities available to a young artist at the time?
Well, or a young fan for that matter. I mean,
Right, right, yeah.
my older brother was like 6 years older than me, so he brought the rock and roll into the house. I mean, I'm a '60s child, so I grew up with all the the hippie rock, to start with, on every bench or stone, on the square sat a hippie playing, Dylan or Neil Young or Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, I mean, that kind of stuff. And of course, also a lot of Danish folk, And, once my brother was sort of had departed from the Beatles and Deep Purple and Black Sabbath and Zeppelin and all the big English rock, Jethro Tull, Uriah Heep, all
Wow.
that came to the house and Bad Company, it I was too young because I mean I was into Queen, I was into Slade and Sweet, I was into and then later on a little Thin Lizzy and that kind of stuff. But then as I grew older, I would go back and revisit those big rock bands that I was simply too young to understand. So that is, I mean, I've been breastfed by the person.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's a great answer. I love over the years listening to your stuff. There's a definite folk vibe to a lot of your music over the years, and it kind of makes sense to me now, like growing up in Vietnam, the Vietnam era, how that folk influence kind of permeated your music. Even though you're not really well known for folk, I hear that in a lot of your solo stuff over the years.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, that's probably that might actually be one of the best things you'll say, or whatever. Because I love that. I mean, I of course appreciate that you like my stuff, but it's even more important to me that you identify with exactly what it is.
Right.
Because the problem is that when there's an image of someone on stage in 1988, with a washboard stomach, long blonde hair, pants that are so tight that you can't call them pants anymore. And then you go, you know what? This guy is actually a folk artist.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of confuses you. But this was still the ugly duckling. This was work in progress. I just had to go through the '80s to get to where I sort of wanted to be.
Mm-hmm. Kind
And
of
I
chasing your
enjoyed going
passion.
through
You
the
had
80s.
to pay your dues to get to your passion, so to speak.
Yeah, and the thing is if you could picture this, that when Vito and I sat and wrote the White Lion songs, he would sit in front of me with the Stratocaster, and I would sit on the other side with the acoustic guitar, and I might start sort of like a Dylan or Neil Young thing, and Vito would sort of look at me and going, okay, that's sort of pretty simple, but there's something in the melody that I like. And then he would take over, and then suddenly with these big guitar parts would come, and then I would flip the guitar over and use it as a drum kit, because now my guitar part was done,
Mm-hmm.
and Vito was taking over, and now he was pulling me to the next or into the chorus, with where the sort of the guitar would go, and that would be our process in many times of how we let the song show us where we were going. I mean, we never once sat down and saying we're going to write this kind of song.
Right. And lyrically speaking, as a consumer of music in the 80s, lyrically speaking, White Lion didn't really line up with the rest of the rock bands that were out then. There was more content and subject matter within White Lion's music. That's always why I gravitated towards your music and why I have those folk vibes, because of the subject matter and the lyrics.
Now you're saying another great thing. Yeah, but
So,
no, but those are facts, and that of course has a lot to do with my European upbringing and coming as coming to America, of course, with a big smile on my face, and every single thing that I looked at, I loved. Everything what the country stood for, I loved. I soaked it in. It's still been the greatest time in my life when I lived in the USA. I miss it every single day. It's a different country now, but everything that I experienced back then. But something happened when I sat down with that legal yellow legal notepad, and I started, writing. It didn't want me to sing, write tits and ass and pickup trucks and
right.
beer and stuff like that. I mean, there are a few things where I sort of, did my own little share of it, but overall, I wanted to say something different, and I struggled with it at times because management and record company did not want
Yeah.
another Bono or another Michael Stipe or something like that. But I was never thinking about that I was being anything but myself, and that's what it felt like I should write.
So, as a creative person, there was that struggle there between your passion for subject matter, but then that marketability too, right? Because you have to be marketable as well, because you have your label and your management and all that are pushing that, and they want to sell you, but you as an artist, you want to be true to your art as well. So that struggle has to be tough.
Yeah, of course it was, and I'm happy that I stood my ground and it never got changed because now, like you said, 45 years later, I'm not ashamed of. I'm proud of that I took the stand, and some of these. I mean, when the children cry is about what's going on in Israel, Palestine, is what's going on in Ukraine.
40 years
It's a
later,
song, it's a song
absolutely.
I wrote in 1985 in my manager's basement. It's just what it is. It's timeless.
You got one of my questions right off the bat here about When the Children Cry. I did want to thank you for writing that song because 40 years later, still my favorite song from the 80s by far. Love the song. Huge treat to have you here just for that. Like having the guy who wrote that song on my show is incredible. But the
Well, I appreciate
relevancy,
it.
talking about timeless, the relevancy of a song like that 40 years later and being able to apply that to just a plethora of different events over the years, it's always relevant. At the time when you're writing that song, is that something you're trying to do?
Of course not. It would simply just be natural because if I had sat there, I've told this story 5 million times from
I'm
the
sure.
States and
Yeah.
or in interviews and things like that. But you got to kind of like just look at the scenario at that time. Ronald Reagan is the president.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, America is feared in every corner of the world for just being a strong country.
Mm-hmm.
The feeling at a rock concert is celebration. People are happy. Everywhere I go, people are having a party. Money is flowing from the record companies. Rock and roll radio is just kicking ass. Every arena show with a rock band is selling out. I mean, everything is great. And here I am sitting in my cowboy boots, my Levi's 501 blues, and my long blonde hair, and my acoustic guitar, writing "No More Presidents" and "All the Wars Will End."
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I can only because I can't really defend it. I can't really say where it comes from. But at the same time, I could just look back to Copenhagen and the protests that were, at the time of Vietnam and stuff like, even though we have had nothing to do with it.
Right.
So I grew up seeing that in a different way, and it had its impact on me, knowing what it was and how the older kids, or like the signs and the things that were written on the signs, it just left something in me that later on I would pull out and use and make sense of it.
So it's those earlier influences that we talked about, the Dylans and the Youngs and the CSNYs and the Crosbys and all of them. 10 years later, those influences are still at the tip of your tongue, so to speak, or at the point of your pen.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and the funny thing is that, the thing that made, as much as I love the rock and roll, I mean, I came to the U.S. sort of like, wanting to, follow in the footsteps of David Lee Roth, that stood for the complete opposite of what we're talking about.
That's funny.
So these are one of those things that no matter what you think you want to be, your DNA is your DNA, and my upbringing, or my lack of upbringing, coming from a divorced, family, three boys, and my mom worked in a bar around the corner. I mean, we had nothing, but we had everything. We had freedom, and by our mom giving us that freedom, we didn't need to rebel.
Mm-hmm.
And all those things would stick with me, both in how strong my mom were when she had nothing. And to me, it would always be, there's no quitting, there's no surrendering, there's no returning, there's only forward.
And over the years of your catalog, freedom is definitely a theme that you can find sprinkled throughout your music. There's a lot of different songs about freedom over the course of your career, so that always stuck with you, and that shines through within your art as a consumer. I hear that. Now, you most of your career has been recorded in the English language. Well, you know what? Before we get to that, I wanted to talk about your love for the U.S. You mentioned that. You came over here with the Danish Lions, and they left without you. They went back, and you stayed. You were like, nah, I'm good. I like it here. What was that decision? Was that spur of the moment, or like was that thought of beforehand?
There was never an option of going home or going back. It's as simple as that. Once that Viking ship had, docked in New York City Harbor, man, it was, it's regardless of what would happen in the long run. But no, man, I wasn't coming to America. I was escaping Denmark.
Right. And so that shaped, that one decision completely turned your entire life on its ear. And so any regrets? I imagine there's not a single regret about that, right?
No, and there's not a single regret there, because one thing led to another. I have almost never met, I know there is someone, but I've never met anyone like me that would basically sacrifice everything in their life for living the rock and roll life. And when I'm saying the living the rock and roll life, that's not hanging out at the Rainbow Bar and Grill and Sunset Strip. It's not driving in a limousine or walking around with mirrored sunglasses, but it's being in the world of rock and roll, where sort of the language and things make sense to you. I mean, the total opposite of a Congress hearing with a CIA director. I mean, it's just that's sort of what I want. I mean, to tell you the truth, when I got into my first band, and back in those days, we had our own truck and we had our own PA system. Man, I was more interested in being a roadie.
Wow.
I just took a liking to that, which means basically today there is nothing that I don't know about what it takes to put a show together, to raise a stage, to fly a PA system, to connect it to whatever it is, because that's what we were doing in the rawest form. And I know I'm jumping all over the place, but when we toured with AC/DC, I would get up early, and the tour bus would arrive early in the morning outside the arena. I'd get up there and I see them fly the PA, hang the lights, and I would sit at the soundboard and ask questions. Dude, I just had an interest in wanting to know what it all took. So it's been nice to follow how that all evolved and technology became so and so and so, from the cassette tape to, the digital format.
So just trying to be a sponge, as a young guy.
Look up, yeah, man, the funniest thing about that, because we had been living in Spain for a few years before we came to the U.S.
Right.
And once I said in my, sort of like in my mind that we were going to the U.S., I would tackle Americans that I heard anywhere that were in the streets or anywhere, and drain them from knowledge, because my plan was that I was starting, there was something called American Forces Network, because in Madrid there was an American Air Force base. So they had an American radio station and an American TV station. And, I was glued to that. So I told myself, I started watching the Johnny Carson show and all those kind of things, and seeing how when guests and stuff that came on. And I always thought to myself, one time I'm going to sit in that couch. And I don't want to be the one from Sweden. They always call people from Denmark from Sweden and stuff like that.
Yep.
I wanted to be someone that could sit and talk to anybody. So I just drained everybody from knowledge. So when I arrived in America, I knew everything. I lived in New York for 7 years. I've never been to the Empire State Building. I've never been to Statue of Liberty. Never been in the World Trade Center. I was a New Yorker. They were just part of the city that I lived in. I've never been to an American tourist attraction.
So you were soaking things up prior to social media, the old-fashioned hard way, just by word of mouth. That's awesome. So you must love social media then.
Yeah, I mean, there's an elderly American man that became my friend. I was living in my building. I started going to church with him. It didn't matter. It was a pleasure for me. And then I started reading books and stuff like that. The first English book that I read was A Stand by Stephen King.
Nice.
And shortly after that, as strange things happened, I started dreaming English.
Wow. That's got to be different.
I knew I was ready.
Yeah. So let's talk about English versus Danish, because most of your career has been recorded in the English language, but you have released 2 albums in Danish as well. I'd love to hear your opinion on whether or not you feel like your homeland connects to the Danish albums the same way that English-speaking countries relate to your English albums, and if there is a difference in that, in your opinion.
Well, I mean, it's kind of tough to compare or compete or compare anything to English, because it's just the spoken language. Most of, I mean, I wouldn't say most of the world, obviously, Russia, China, South America. But the thing is, the 2 Danish albums is not, they're not just in Danish. They're also storytelling of my childhood.
Right.
So not just the words, but the whole feeling in the music and stuff like that is almost the sound and the smell of my youth.
Right. So it's autobiographical.
Yeah, because the lyrics are written by my biographer.
Okay.
These are the only 2. These are the only songs that I have not written the lyrics. But the lyrics is almost the musical version of the book.
Okay.
So when the first lyric arrived, one night when I was sitting in my studio or stuff like that, and I looked at it, and I said, "That's a song that I wrote, or that's a lyric that I wrote," because it was me. So I started looking at that, because I'd never really, besides one song in my career, have written music to words. I always write my words after I established the music, because I hate to change anything. Okay. So, once I know the melody is secure and everything like that, I will feel the music out and where it's taking me, lyrically wise. But now I have this Danish lyric in front of me, about me as a child and stuff like that, as a young man. And so I went to the piano, which is really not where I sort of write the rock songs. And I started there, and instantly, it was clear where I was going with that. And recorded the song, and I sent it to my friend, and it says, "Man, are you also crying?" Because it hit me so hard. I'd never been there because, like I said early on, I was escaping from Denmark. I always said, I'm never going to come back. I hate the fucking place. It actually took me almost 30 years and a whole new generation and everything that the old country represented, the negative side, to disappear. And I mean, I was one of the first one with bleach blonde hair in Denmark. I was one of the only ones who had dreams,
Right.
and that was really against the rule and stuff like that. So you know, it was coming that full circle, and then songs about my mom and everything about the small stores that are not there anymore, and talking to the guy who's you know oh yeah.
Yeah. And you talked about piano. I have another question here about piano. So I'm kind of segueing off of your answers here, just so you know. Piano has had a huge role within your music, at least from my perspective, listening to it. And that, like you said yourself, that's not typically a staple of rock and roll music. How did you make that work over the years? Because the piano is amazing within your music and your sound. So how
Well,
do
I
you
mean,
make that work from a rock and roll standpoint?
yeah, well, but now you're talking about my solo albums. There
Yes.
it belongs because I mean, in these days where everything has to have a label or everything has to compare. When it comes to my solo albums and my inspiration and my influence and what I have been leaning up against, I mean, we are talking Dylan, Springsteen, Neil Young, and Tom Petty. I mean, those are like my four horsemen of inspiration. Elton John, and then there are newcomers like Ryan Adams and things like that that combines that song. I mean, the piano and the Hammond organs are my two favorite instruments. And so, but they didn't belong in 80s rock and roll.
Right.
At least not the style we were. But another thing that I'm also sort of like bringing out is that as we got along, Vito and I always saw that we were actually heading somewhere else with it, and we wanted to go towards Journey and Kansas, and use the keyboard the way they used it. I mean, the '80s keyboard was somebody standing behind the curtain playing a pad,
Right. Right.
and it's like keyboard was not allowed and stuff like that. But it had been obviously you know immortalized by John Lord and Deep Purple and Keith Emerson and Elton John, and of course in Journey, Greg Raleigh and Steve Walsh in Kansas, two of my favorites and things like that. And that's why we wanted to do it, but it was constant. We were constantly fighting that the '80s image and things like that. So once the opportunity came, it was something that we wanted. We never really got to do it at the end, but had we done a fifth album, and had we sort of like moved around from grunge and picked another corner where we just waited that out, White Lion would have definitely been in the prog rock going into the future, with some big songs where the keyboard was going to have almost as big a part as the guitar.
Yeah, and so when you moved from White Lion to Freak of Nature, you kind of went in the opposite of what we're talking about here. You kind
Yeah,
of went darker, right? It was more of a
yeah,
darker theme.
yeah.
So where were
It
you
was
at?
Rehab.
Yeah, where were you at musically to go that way? Not lighter, but
Well, there,
darker.
yeah, I mean, I appreciate. I always love that when we can sort of go down a road because it all ties in together. Freak of Nature. I was joking. Rehab was all about finding my feet again, and the things that I had then discovered that had gone sort of wrong in White Line, even though I was the one who founded the band, and even though I was the catalyst of the songwriting, and would drag Vito into it. I knew that for me to create a new band that would be legit and sound legit, each would have to contribute with the songwriting. So once I formed the band of how I wanted the band, we set up in a circle in the rehearsal room, and everybody was responsible for their instrument, and they didn't butt into anybody else, which means that those two albums are written that way. They were always written live, and that's what created that completely teamwork of everything. Nobody was waiting for the other person. Everybody was jumping in at the same time. Like a hockey team attacking. Like a football team defending. We were there together, and that's why that worked. Hence, why then, when Freak of Nature then ends, I was bound to go solo. I could not give my heart and soul to a team anymore. I needed to just be myself.
And then fast forward a lot of years to the acoustic version of Mike Tramp. Now, I am a big fan of toned down, solo acoustic, almost an unplugged feel to music. And so for me, my favorite record of yours is Museum. I absolutely love the trip that record takes you down, just because of how toned down it is from a production standpoint. So I want to know from you, you've put out so many different styles and stuff of music, not even really genres, but styles. What is it for you? Where's the passion lie mostly for you? Like, where's the music at for you? Do you like the solo stuff? Do you like the band more? What are the benefits of each, I suppose?
It's nice to walk in on stage with a band. It's nice to sit in a car with a band. It's nice to go into a diner with a band and sit there.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to songwriting, it's nice to be alone. I love that you say Museum. Museum is one of my own favorite albums because it's one of two albums where I sort of went back into the room and started almost experimenting with simplicity, because that's really only me and my co-producer / engineer / multi-musician Soren Anderson on the album previous, Cobblestone Street, which is almost all acoustic, and then Museum. After Museum, it's now full band. But the thing is that by the time I started my solo career, everybody had started sort of a family life, and I couldn't start a band anymore. Everybody always needed to go home at some time. And even though that I had started a family too somehow, that was just part of the road. But the family would never be holding me back. I was born to run. I was born to move on. So it was just part of it. So that would always take a backseat to what I was doing creative-wise. And I've never been in this for glory. I've been in this because it's who I am. It's where I found solace. It's where I found freedom. It's where I exist. It's where everything makes sense to me. Once I turn on the TV, and I see what they call the real world, I see a bunch of grown-ups lying to each other, lying to people and stuff like that, et cetera, et cetera. So within the walls of rock and roll, at least the creative parts, there was a sanctuary where you sort of were, like a playroom where there were no restriction whatsoever. If somebody says, let's put a violin on, then you go, well, let's try the violin. And if the violin doesn't work, we're going to put the Hammond organ on. So, I mean, and here we are. The reason we talk is because as I went out and dedicated myself to my solo career, every venue I would show up to would have a poster saying the voice of White Lion. And half of the audience would be there expecting White Lion. At least it made me feel like they were expecting it. And in that way, I'm very sensitive. I couldn't just go up there and just say, "Fuck you, man." I'm just so. Then I was
Yeah.
starting introducing acoustic versions of the White Lion songs, which had been written that way, so they fitted perfect. But it was never the plan. I had said goodbye to White Lion. I had closed it down, sealed the box, and put it away. Started Freak of Nature, and after Freak of Nature, I'd started a solo career, and it was damn hard. It wasn't being received by record companies or anything with open arms. So I ended up on small record companies, playing clubs for a limited audience and so on. So, but I believed in my songs because they were me. So I continued. But that White Lion ghost kept chasing me through the night, through every album. And basically, sort of in and out, led me to that. Let's see what happened if I bring it back out, dust it off, giving a new paint job, meaning re-recording the songs, making them, especially vocally wise, making them sound like the singer now will tell you the story in the songs. And you can hear it in his voice that he's not 25 years old. He's a grown man that has sailed the seven seas more than once, and he has the story to back it up.
Well, yeah, White Lion is definitely probably a double-edged sword for you, and I can understand the sensitivity for that. I mean, I've been to a lot of concerts in my time, and sometimes the deeper cut songs are the ones that are the better songs. Those are the better songs. But those aren't the songs that people by and large want to hear. But on the flip side of the coin of that, if you're a solo artist and that's where your passion is, now at least you're going to learn who your true fans are, the ones that are fans of Mike Tramp, not the ones that are fans of White Lion. And I think at the end of the day, yeah, that might be a good thing. You know what I mean? At least you can finally find your true fans. And I mentioned Museum because for me, listening to your catalog, that felt like it was one of the first times you were really allowed to be vulnerable as a songwriter and as a performer. And that really kind of shone through to me as a listener on that record, especially.
Yeah, I mean, I like that. Some of my favorite artists, those kind of albums, when they do that kind of album that has those sort of like, it's sort of like a Quentin Tarantino movie. You basically have no idea what the hell's going on, but at the end,
it's
it
true.
all comes together. So all these songs are by the same artist, and you recognize it, but they're all going different places. And I would never ever do an album like that again because I could only paint that picture once. And whenever I revisit it, I go, wow, what the hell happened here? But this was, I'd written these songs, but I hadn't really put them into a set style. And here I would be in the studio with Sean Anderson at night going, wow, let's do this. And we just had a great time. And it's nice to be reminded because, of course, in this whole White Lion thing and out now touring the world with this thing like that, I forget about where I've been. And sometimes when I'm reminded about it, I smile and says, okay, you know what? If it was to end now, I have been there and I have done what I set out to do.
And you never know who's listening, man. You know what I mean? You just never know. And you don't know who you're reaching. But yeah, the reason you mentioned the reason why we're here is because of the Songs of White Lion Volume 2 that's coming out on August 23rd. Which you did one, I think it was 2023, you did Volume 1, which was kind of the bigger hits of White Lion, and these are kind of deeper cuts. But I want to kind of hear your strategy behind these songs and why you're reimagining them and re-recording them. I've heard you say in other interviews that you can't even listen to those songs from the 80s anymore. So that's kind of the formula behind re-recording them. But I'd love to hear it in your own words. And does technology have kind of a role in this, like wanting to update the technology because there's better tools available today?
Man, but you're saying it so good. I cannot top that. No, I mean, again, I truly appreciate that because I mean, doing interviews and stuff like that. It's great when you gel, and it's not a matter of if if that you say all the things that I want to hear, but it's just like you observing what is exactly what the point about all of this is. And that is, in reality, if you were to go back and throw that pitch again, would you throw the same curveball?
That's the question, right?
And exactly. So now, and you can look at it in two ways. Obviously, I'm 35 years older than when I sang "Wait" in the studio first time.
Mm.
I was young, energetic, full of things, and really didn't know where the hell I was going. It was just, we were just on a fast-paced train. Everybody was, we were going to our own, Woodstock or whatever. Everybody was just, nobody knew, and everything felt right. When I look back through the years and stuff like that, there is one point which, especially as a singer, I know that some of my heroes seems like to have gotten it right the first time, or of course I don't know the background, but the more I sing a song, the more I discover what I can do with the song. I'm not necessarily a natural. There are people that just can grab the microphone and you just get goosebumps and things like that. I establish the melody and stuff like that. But sometimes with learning and going around and things like that, I'm going to say this, in a very serious way. I make love in a different way now than I did when I was 18.
Absolutely, of course. Yeah.
It's simply just the stuff like that. I mean, experience is experience in a different way, and also experience as a singer, and getting the chance to sing these songs where I feel now that the voice fits the face, fits the time, fits everything, that I feel it's very legit what I'm presenting with it in so and so. And of course I'm not gonna rain on those people that these songs meant the world to when they were 16, 17 and they went to the concert. I felt the same, but now getting a chance to just saying, you know what? I always meant for Mona Lisa to have blonde hair.
Right. And so it's all about delivery. You just want to deliver them in a different way because of who you are now rather than who you were then. And those
Yeah,
songs
my
are
whole
still
thing
available
about
to us that like the versions from then. So it's like having your cake and eating it too, right?
I have a sort of love-hate relationship with how hard rock of the 80s sort of has gotten this carte blanche age-wise, that there's no limit. So whatever you can do to sort of fool the people, because there are maybe a handful out of 1,000 rock singers that can come close to what they were 40 years ago.
Absolutely.
There are no ball players. There are no gymnasts. There's no hockey players. There's no
Nope.
race car drivers that can return to who they were when they're 50s. Why does rock and roll singers have to be or sound like the same 40 years later? It is impossible.
I agree. Yeah.
And then there are the bands that go searching for somebody that sounds like their singer and looks younger, and then they kick the singer out, and now they have a new guy, and they get extended life.
Yeah. Very good points. So I wanted to make a couple of more points with you before we have to get off of here. The first thing is, again, we talked about this being your 50th year in the music business. I want to hear you talk about how you continue to have so much passion for what you do, because it's so apparent to me just talking to you for less than an hour how passionate you still are about this. How do you keep that after so much time in the business?
I think without really have ever given it a thought, that I have kept my 2 feet on the ground. To maybe explain it in a different way, when I went out in 2013 and toured the world just with an acoustic guitar and a suitcase full with CDs and T-shirts, I said to myself, most venues you will have to get through the front bar, through the audience, and up on stage. and after the show back the other way. There's no back entrance. You're not going to come in and then suddenly appear on stage, which means that you're already in the moment. And there are people that would not be able to do that. But I thought about, hey, you're raised in the streets of Copenhagen in a pretty rough working man's neighborhood and stuff like that. You're just you. You've always been you. You hung out with the roadies. On the White Lion tours when we toured with Kiss, I was driving with some of the truck drivers to see the American highway. When you are that way naturally, then that passion you're talking about is just part of the daily life. That I love that life that surrounds rock and roll, and that's not the backstage party, and that's not the limousine on the private airplanes, which I've never had. Hey, I've had some great backstage parties, but to me, it was always, what is it that when everything is gone is still there, and that is the song and the artist. And if you can be there with an acoustic guitar, and you can play Little Fighter, or you can play When the Children Cry, and you see people in the audience and after the show telling you, you know what, I was sitting in the hospital when my 3-year-old son passed away from cancer. We played Little Fighter to him every night. Thank you for playing that song. Then everything makes sense.
And I thanked you for the song earlier. I thank you for the songs, all of them. Your solo, your Freak of Nature, your White Lion, your Mabel, your Danish Lions, everything. Thank you for the songs, Mike. Just an incredible career. August 23rd, Songs of White Lion Volume 2 will be hitting the shelves, and you are going to be going on tour, I assume, to support the record. When does the tour start, and where are you? I know you can't tell us everywhere you're going, but everybody needs to go to the website, which we'll put in the description below, so you can get your Mike Tramp in.
Most people probably go to Mike Tramp official Facebook. That's where it's all is,
Okay.
We actually start in Las Vegas on the 23rd of August, the day the album comes out, and we finish the October 24th, 2 months later, at the Whiskey in Hollywood, and everywhere in between, almost
everywhere.
Almost.
So, last question: what other projects do you have going on? Because I know you're always working on something. Let us know. Tell us what you're doing now, other than the tour and all this other stuff.
Well, I mean, we'll be touring a lot, especially in Europe and also Australia and Asia next year with the White Lion songs. But there is a new English soul album on the way. I mean, it's basically it's already written and demoed and stuff like that. To me, it's really just a matter of when I finish it and when I look for a release, so on. So God knows if it would grant me the opportunity to go out with my dream band, meaning the sound of the album, not a compromised version, and just go out and get a chance for once in my life to perform my solo albums the way they sound on the albums.
So, guys, it's Mike Tramp Official on Facebook. We're going to put that in the description below. We'll also get you guys a link not only to the website, but we'll also make sure that there's a link directly to the record when it comes out as well in the description. You guys make sure you're purchasing the music, stream the music, do it, buy it wherever you get your music. Mike, thank you so much for your time today, my friend.
It has been my pleasure. I truly enjoyed it. I hope we can get to do it again, and then we'll just, we'll really go deep into the solo albums.
Man, I would love to do that. Just let me know. I have all the time in the world for you, my friend.
I appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Yeah. Hey, this is Ross Gibson. Thank you for tuning in to the 10 Minutes with Boston Chris podcast.